The filmmaker, actress, and creator of the film The Invisible Vegan, which is an unapologetically Black documentary that I recently had the pleasure of watching. Two of our speakers from this morning, Christopher Sebastian and Lauren Ornelas, are in the film, as well as many other Black and brown folks from a wide variety of backgrounds and professions promoting vegan and plant-based diets. Having worked with AFCO of Black Vegans Rock and Breeze Harper of Sista Vegan, both of whom are also in the film, I recognize that bringing veganism to folks in the Black community means meeting them where they're at. But I also recognize, as Jasmine shows in her film, that Black folks don't need veganism brought from outside of our communities because we were already there. Black veganism is not a rejection of our culture and pathways, it is a reclaiming of it. So please welcome Jasmine Leyva.
All right, hello everybody, good afternoon. So first I want to thank Karen, Hope, United Poultry Concerns for even bringing me to speak here at this conference. Like standing here today, it just reminds me how far I've come in my own personal journey and how I interact with the world. So I'm very privileged to be here among everyone, so thank you. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with my work, as Pax so lovely described, I directed a film called The Invisible Vegan, and it focuses on veganism in the Black community. Now in the film, I promote reasons for eating ethically. I touch on the history of plant-based eating in the Black community. I show some of the cruel factory farming practices, and I also make an argument for why people of color should be concerned with these issues. But in the spirit of fairness, I'm also critical of the vegan movement, and I touch on the somewhat stained reputation of the animal rights movement in communities of color and the reason behind some of those stigmas. Now, before I continue, just for anyone who is unfamiliar with my work, I'm going to show a small snippet of the film. It's not going to be too long, but just something for people who might not have seen the film so you can get an idea of how I go about approaching the topic.
My 6-year-old brother, I told him one day when we were driving, there was a squirrel and it was ran over. And he said, look, it's a dead squirrel. I'm like, yeah, that's the same as your meat and stuff. And he said, no, it's not. I said, yeah, because they kill animals for it. And how do you like that? He said, I don't like that. So then he went vegetarian. And then I convinced him to go vegan just from him saying, you know, the milk that you're drinking comes from a mama cow's boob. And I was like, do you like to drink out of mama cow's boob? And he said, I don't want to drink out of no one's boob. So I was like, yeah, go vegan.
Up until a few years ago, I really didn't care about animal rights. I'm not proud of that at all, but it's the truth. I remember when I was working at a talent agency years ago, and one of the actresses came in telling me about how she rescued this baby squirrel, and she took said squirrel to a rescue shelter in Malibu where he had a cliffside view of the ocean, organic acorns, and whatever the hell that was. And I remember I was just so annoyed because I was like, you know what, somewhere there's a squirrel that's living the life better than me. And my irritation at that moment kind of summed up how I felt about animal rights. Like, this is a privileged issue.
Unfortunately, in some ways that it is, because we do afford the ability to be worried about another species, to be worried about what's happening to animals when many people are just striving for survival.
If you are living in an inner city where you're dodging bullets just to get home, or you are struggling just to put food on the table from day to day, those are your primary concerns. And you have less time, less energy, less mental space to devote to seemingly as esoteric as animal rights.
I think people who are doing vegan outreach or trying to campaign for veganism, they have to be aware of that. And that when you just approach someone and say that you should focus only on saving animals, it makes invisible the material struggles that most of the people in the United States, if not the world, have in just trying to survive as humans themselves.
I acknowledge that we as a movement need to be better about that. I don't think it means us going into communities of color and saying this is what you should and shouldn't do. It doesn't mean comparing slavery to animals and things like that, which I find offensive. I think it's more looking at these structures that have been in place that exploit and kill living beings.
We've been robbed collectively of our empathy. I want Black people to have that empathy back.
Maybe I'll try to take out meat from my diet once a week, or maybe I'll stop using makeup that is tested on animals. To start where you're at and not make it about, you know, just doing this overnight thing.
What are y'all gonna have for lunch?
First things first. No, actually, I was thinking about a kale shake already. Nice. I love kale.
Monday, I might not have any meat. I might do a little meatless Monday.
Back when humans were hunters and gatherers, violence against animals, it was somewhat justified. You know, they didn't have the wide variety of alternatives we have today. But now, you know, all the sadistic, inhumane animal practices they got going on, they're not only barbaric, but it's completely unnecessary. And coming from a spiritual place, in my opinion, I think the whole thing has just become really ungodly.
They get the pigs and stuff and they keep them in cages, and then they can barely even move, and they take them and they kill them for the food. But we don't have to eat animals.
I think it's important that you become inspired by things that make you feel good. And it makes me feel good to know that 7,500 land animals didn't have to die because of me per year.
We're handed this narrative that we can only care about one thing at a time, and that if you care about other species communities, then that somehow mitigates your commitment to Black liberation. And that's a lie. That's a lie that white supremacy has given us. We can care about more than one thing, and indeed we're compelled to care about more than one thing, because our liberation is linked. Animal liberation and Black liberation and queer liberation are all connected to one another.
I eventually want to get to a place where abuse is not something so embedded in my lifestyle. I'm challenging people of color. Like, I'm calling my people to task. The same way we want people to take arms for our cause. The same way we want people to be compassionate for us. You know, I put the ball in your court. Like, if you see this cruelty, if it doesn't bother you, okay, sit tight. But if you know in your heart that what happens in these tapes is wrong, be strong and be disciplined enough to eat that conviction. For me, I grew up in DC and I had certain examples, right. You know. I had the strong Black woman, the independent Black woman. I didn't have the compassionate Black woman. So that's why there's like a break in my empathy. But to hear a woman like you're setting an example, like you're an example that a lot of people don't have.
Thank you. Who, with a heart, can watch when a cow cries when its calf is taken away from it. I mean, how can somebody then just be so bold to say, but I have to have this to live, when you don't? What right do I have to take another sentient being's life when I don't need it to survive? And what right would I have anyway, is what really motivates me.
When I first embarked on my own vegan journey, I felt very alone. I felt disconnected from the mainstream vegan community. And I didn't see myself represented. And that's a common theme that I've heard other people saying, people of color, every time I've had conversations with them about veganism. It's immediately off-putting to them because the way that veganism is offered to us, it seems like this almost elitist thing that is only available for certain segments of the population.
I worry sometimes about being used as a token instead of recognizing that we have every right to be there. We have just as much knowledge and experience to be talking on these issues, and you don't need to just bring me out when the chadeada, which is the Mexican rodeo, comes to town. I can't tell you how many people come up to me, mostly young women of color, who say, do you know how good it feels to have someone who looks like me up there? The need is out there, but we have a movement that seems to be very focused on not us.
Thank you. So as you can see, when I approach veganism or animal rights, I bring other types of oppression into the conversation. And, you know, that because of that choice, I've been lightly criticized for that. because you'll go to spaces, vegan spaces, where people just want to talk about health or just want to talk about animals or just want to talk about the environment. And while veganism might have one definition in the dictionary, it means a million different things to a million different people. And I love learning about the different interpretations of how people take their veganism, even if I don't agree with it. And being exposed to a new way of thinking is just something that I value personally. But it's not always something that other people value. Every now and then, for animal rights speaking gigs, I'll get an email that says something along the lines of, okay, make sure you keep it about the animals. And I could be wrong, but I decode that message whenever I see it as, hey, Black woman, you can come to these events and you can talk about the animals, but it'd be really nice if you left your identity at home. So I could be wrong. But if you don't want to learn about the psychology of the people you're advocating to, I think that's stupid. Plain and simple, to me, it's stupid. You have to think of animal rights, and I'm saying this kind of as a media professional. Think of animal rights as a product. You're trying to get people to consume. A marketing team, they would come in, they would research the demographic they're marketing to, and come up with a campaign based on that research. They don't come up with advertising campaigns that are palatable for people who already work at the company. They come up with campaigns that are palatable to people they are selling to. So you have to know the people you're selling to. And you might want to keep the conversation solely about animal rights, but is that the conversation that other people want to have? And as much as I love attending vegan events, I go to a lot of them, I'm not a fan of groupthink. I don't want to hear about plant-based eating or animal rights entirely from angles that I agree with, or angles that resonate with my particular set of beliefs, circumstances, or priorities. I want to hear what different types of people have to say. And I want to hear unbiased, out-of-the-box views on veganism, because that's what helps me advocate more effectively. Now, even though I believe in the core values of veganism, I don't always agree with vegans. Well, all vegans. And if I say something in my talks that doesn't put sections of the vegan community in the most angelic light, I'm not trying to be destructive to the movement, but as a filmmaker, as a journalist, as a human, just me as a person, I'm just trying to be fair. And I'm just trying to see things from both sides. Nobody is perfect. No movement is perfect. But the more introspection a person or group is willing to do, I think the more potential that movement has to be great, because it'll come from a place of fairness and honesty and sharing, and not, just judgment and fanaticism. Today, I could get up here and give an entire presentation about the horrors of factory farming in regards to chickens or other poultry and fowl. I could show you graphic videos. I could walk you through the unspeakable fate of a chicken and other fowl. I could quote statistics for how these practices affect our environment. But I feel like I'd be preaching to the choir. Most of the audience will walk away with new details, but not necessarily any new ideas. So, and honestly, if you attend a conference called United Poultry Concerns, most likely the issue is just already a concern for you. So it'd be a waste of my time to try to win over people in this room. Y'all already aboard the train. So if I bring up race, gender, sexual orientation, or another group or topic that doesn't feel directly related, my objective isn't to decenter the plight of the animal and hijack their platforms to talk about my oppression. That's not it. My objective is to help people in the animal rights community who might come from different backgrounds advocate more effectively to people who come from oppressed groups. And that might entail for some, putting your ego aside and being willing to hear perspectives that you might not want to hear, because that's what you are asking of other people. You're asking other people to be willing to hear something that they might not agree with, or they might not want to hear because it disrupts their thinking or their way of life. So as a community, I feel like we have to do the same. When I hear a perspective that I don't agree with, I'm not a big debater. Like I'm not that person. I listen. I don't respond with intense emotion, because I feel like then, other people, they'll respond to my emotion or my negative energy instead of, me saying something that's calculated. And I just listen, because being aware of the problems people have with what I'm saying or with the animal rights community, what that does is that helps me create a stronger campaign. So then the next time I talk to someone else, I know, okay, I'm not going to step on this landmine. I know this trigger. It kind of helps me in my advocacy. So I geared my film towards African Americans. And I knew that the animal rights movement did not have the most popular reputation in my community. So I addressed those concerns in my film. I made a point of understanding where the Black community, my community, were coming from with their complaints. Yes, I understand you. I understand how this can come off as a privileged issue. Yes, I understand that given your nuanced history with animals, where we were referred to as animals as a form of dehumanization, I understand why a group of white people comparing your struggle to an animal might come off as offensive. Yes, I understand why you don't feel welcomed into this community because of a lack of representation. But let me offer a perspective that is custom tailored for you. And I can't tell you how many people have watched my film, people who've never considered veganism or had any interest in, the animal rights movement, and told me, you know what? Nobody broke it down the way you did. So that's the reason why diversity is so important in this space, because it covers all bases. Some of you in this room might have gained interest because, you saw a graphic video, or other people, you might have watched a documentary, because there's some great documentaries, or you might have heard someone speak. And I actually became interested in animal rights when I was exposed to the work of people like Christopher Sebastian, who spoke earlier today, and, Angela Davis, when I saw a clip of her, talking about the topic. And these approaches resonated with me because they addressed the connection between animal liberation and my liberation. So when I speak about my work on racial issues in conjunction with veganism or animal rights, I'm not trying to all lives matter the animal rights arena. My intention is to spark the same interest in someone else that Angela Davis kind of sparked in me. Because if I'm being honest, animal rights on its own, the way it was presented to me, wasn't enough to persuade me to pursue ethical eating patterns. Because I wasn't brought up to look at animals as sentient beings, like not at all. I grew up in the city, okay? So in the city, you don't see that much wildlife. And the animals, you don't. And the animals you do encounter, like you're not taught to love them and live in harmony with them. If you see a roach or a spider, it's like, step on it. If you see a mouse, put it in a trap. If a raccoon or a snake is in your house, you need to get somebody to capture it. If you see a stray cat, don't feed it because you don't want it to come back. If you want a pet, you have to put it in a cage. And lastly, if it's an animal on the farm, you eat it. So this, I had this kind of relationship with living beings all my life. So it would be hard for someone to come in and just show me a video because I don't have the foundation built to even take that in yet. So like many, I grew up with that kind of relationship with animals, and I was desensitized to violence inflicted on animals because that's how I was conditioned by my mom, my family, my teachers, and everybody who was of any importance during my developmental years. Not to mention the foods that vegans were protesting were the foods that I grew up on. So to say, that way of eating and living is wrong, means my mother was wrong. And it means my grandmother was wrong. And that wasn't easy for me to accept, so I know that's not easy for other people to accept. One of the reasons why I don't engage in these big, vegan crusades and debates at dinner table or in casual spaces is because I understand the gravity of what I'm challenging. I'm challenging a person's conditioning. I'm challenging their culture. I'm challenging what their parents have taught them. I'm also doing it with the added burden of the extremist reputation sometimes associated with people who do advocate for animals. So I try to approach the subject to others with the utmost respect and humility. I truly feel like that is what's happening here today, and I'm honored to be a part of it. This organization, United Poultry Concerns, is dedicated to helping an oppressed group without a voice. And I'm sure, like practically every other animal rights organization, they get hit with, but what about human oppression? And some may respond by dismissing the concerns of the people they ultimately need to give the movement inertia. But United Poultry Concerns, UPC, they're doing it right. I appreciate them digging deeper and for being willing to prioritize the concerns of the people that they're advocating to. And I think that's a very selfless and progressive step. And while addressing these isms might seem off-brand or off-topic to people who are already in the movement, considering my own journey, I genuinely believe this approach might be a good magnet to other people. It's good for people to see that this is a space where people, all types of people, are represented, and to know that fighting against, chicken and fowl cruelty isn't about dismissing human oppression. It's about being allowed to care about more than one thing. So, just shout out to Karen and Hope for that. Like, I'm feeling that. All right, so I'm also really glad that I got invited to this event because it focuses on like a specific group of animals. And usually I get invited to places where, they're just talking about animals as a whole. So since this conference, mainly focuses on poultry, I decided to read up on the group that I am speaking on behalf of.
My 6-year-old brother, I told him.
Okay, so I went to the bookstore and I found a book called The Natural History of Chicken by Joseph Barbera. And it covers so much, how pecking orders are established, how the baby chicks imprint, how chickens clean themselves. They even have a chapter where I learned all about like chicken STDs and how to tell, if chickens had a hookup that went wrong. So apparently if you see a chicken whose feathers looks a little rough, bad night. And it was refreshing because, being in the thick of like this space, I'm so used to reading about animals or consuming, animal media in relation to human torture. So it was nice, to be reminded that there are other ways to, promote the importance of their lives. And since I also focus on advocating to groups that are commonly left out of mainstream vegan discussions, being a Black woman, I decided to look up the symbolic relationship between Black people and chicken. So for decades, Black people have been associated with a love of chicken. And so I had to ask myself, what's the basis behind this stereotype? And this question was important to me because I catered my film to the Black demographic. So if I'm asking specific people to give up chicken, it might help my case to know what chickens mean to that particular group. One of the interview subjects in my documentary, Psyche Williams-Forson, there's a beautiful photo of her, she authored a book entitled Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs. And between her book, the interview I conducted with her, and things I read online, I learned a lot about the history of chicken within the Black community. Now, initially, I thought the stereotype of black people loving chicken just had a taste-related origin, or it was an association, just curated by racists to make us look stupid. And while those two factors play a part in that association, chickens actually played a huge role in our survival during slavery and post-slavery. When I learned about the unique and instrumental role chickens played in my culture, I was more motivated to play a role or play a part in helping to preserve their lives. Now, I'm not suggesting that teaching people how chickens help their cultures will result in them giving up KFC. But I do believe teaching people about the cultural importance of poultry might influence how that group perceives chicken. And if people start seeing the historical value of these beings coupled with other arguments, it might help make a case for why these beautiful creatures should be protected and even respected. So during slavery, slaves ate different things depending on what region they were in and the mercy of their masters. And since poultry had a lower and cheaper status, some owners allowed their slaves to keep chickens. And before coming to America, the Americas, Africans in select regions would fry different foods in palm oil. So this is what they did before they got to the Americas. And this technique was not only used for taste, but the food would keep longer. So on the plantation, slaves needed food that would keep them satiated. And since they were not given a lot of free time for culinary activities, it was in their best interest to cook foods that would keep well. And fried chicken became a staple and one of the few joys brought to people in dire circumstances. Now, I want to pause here because I am not celebrating any animal being fried for food, but I am asking that you look at the rose in the concrete. I'm asking that you just learn the meaning behind the animal that you're asking people to give up. So when slavery ended, many of the freed men and women did not know how to read or write. Many were uneducated and lacked skills. So a lot of them ended up right back on the farm working at a slave-like capacity. But some of the women who were used to cooking fried chicken began peddling their delicacy up and down train routes. And this dish helped black women gain entrepreneurial footing in the South, so they were actually able to take care of themselves. It gave them independence. It gave them freedom. And personally, because this animal played such an important role in helping members of my community flourish, I would love to see its symbolism taught to more people. Before slaves came to the Americas, chickens, while still eaten, were regarded as sacred animals in places like West Africa. Why not throw those kind of ideas into the mix? When approaching these topics, why not get creative and, and specific and culturally relevant and out of the box? Because, again, that's why it's so important to learn about subjects from different angles, because different people are inspired by different things. So going back to post-slavery, naturally, when former slaves started doing well, as a result of learning to commodify poultry, there were, other ignorant people that wanted to tear down their accomplishments. So they decided to use the relationship between black people and chicken as a vehicle to make them look stupid. There was even a chain restaurant, like not one, like a chain, called the Coon Chicken Inn that thrived for decades. And the relationship stuck. And instead of this relationship being something empowering, it became something demeaning and dirty. To this day, you still have a lot of black people who are embarrassed about being too intimately associated with chicken. Even myself, I know my history and I have no reason to be embarrassed. But speaking at this conference, the thought did come to my mind, oh God, I'm a black woman at a poultry conference trying to save chickens. And I thought about how that would be perceived. You know, I thought about how me speaking here could be turned into a joke. I thought about how ignorant people looking at a clip of my talk and just reducing me to a chicken-loving Negro. And as absurd, you know, as those concerns might sound to someone who never has to think about their association with chicken, it's a real concern for some. You know, the complicated history of this country has created a very complicated present day. So we have to accept that. And I'm not suggesting that anyone refrain from asking people of color to advocate for poultry, but it's good to have social context when trying to get people on board for certain issues so you can be more calculated with your ask and more understanding should you be met with resistance. I also worried about being perceived the way I once perceived people who fought for causes such as these. You know, when I was in elementary school, I remember testifying before the mayor and the city council on different occasions, and I might have been 9 or 10 the first time I went. And at these meetings, there would be children, like young children around my age, little 8 and 9-year-olds, and they would be mostly black. You know, this was in D.C., and they were begging for a bigger piece of the budget. Unlike California, well, I guess Southern California, because it's kind of cold up here, but D.C. winters get pretty cold, and it can also get pretty hot. So at these meetings, you would hear children begging the city to fix the heater so they didn't have to learn in the cold. You would have them complaining about the poor quality of the food, which I think was probably one step up from prison food, if not the same company. Imagine the psychological message it sends when you grow up in poor conditions and you don't see any white faces fighting for you. Then you see images of cow, pig, chicken, or animal protests, and you see the group of people that were absent while you were struggling, fighting with so much passion to make sure these animals get treated with the utmost care. And it makes you wonder, why didn't they care about people like me? I needed help too. That longing for help is painful, and hurt people hurt people. So instead of wanting to help another group, you begin to resent that group because their poor conditions are worth radical acts of protest, and your poor conditions aren't even worth an appearance. And people walk away, you know, who come from that kind of situation, my situation with, you know, these white people care more about the animals than they care about us. You know, that's how that dynamic got digested when I was young. Now, this is how people in the movement get perceived. And in order to break that perception, you can't be ignorant about it. You have to be aware of it. You have to ask yourself if that's what I'm giving off. Before you get emotional because people don't want to entertain your cause, ask yourself, did you entertain theirs? How people perceive you is an important factor in whether someone will want to help you or not. Now, perception and reality are two different things. Now, when I was young, I didn't see that many white people fighting for the causes that we were fighting for. So I assumed that they weren't. But that was my perception, not necessarily reality. Now I know there have always been amazing people of all races advocating for better schools in minority neighborhoods. I just didn't have eyes beyond my personal experience. And so that's what I like to provide when I come to spaces like this. Yes, I respect that people want to focus on the animals. But if this is a movement, you just have to focus on more. We can't just focus on the message. We have to make sure we put focus on the messengers. Because when people accept or reject the idea of animal rights, a lot of times they're accepting or rejecting the person who presented the idea, or they're rejecting the approach. So let's be open to new approaches. And that's all I ask. All right.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you so much. I'm so touched by your talk. I
I took so many notes. What you said about just wanting to see things from both sides and really empathize with, where people are coming from, and kind of overcoming groupthink and being open to people's out-of-the-box ideas. I related to that so much, and it's something that has been an obstacle for me to kind of participate more, talking to all my friends, just like really participating in discussion. And I just want to know more about what you would recommend for just like helping ourselves to be more open, talking with people with totally opposite points of view, and really using that to strengthen our movement.
So for me, I kind of have a cheat card because I created a film. So the good part about a film is you get to put together like an hour and 20-minute long kind of argument, and people just sit and they have to consume it in a calm space. So, people are already in a good mood. But when I'm talking to when I'm talking to people in my life, I don't push it because I know that people are going to respond to energy. Like, random story, I went to Mexico and my friend, she was like, girl, get off your phone. And then, because I was on my phone, and I just stayed on my phone. And then she said, I guess our tour guide told us this is a dangerous part of Mexico where they snatch or they steal phones. And so I was so upset that I just stayed on my phone because I didn't like the way she told me. And I mean, that means I have some growing that I need to do and some maturing, but but the fact is the way she came at me just made me unreceptive. Even though it was in my best interest, it was just like, I just don't even care because I want to, I'm repelling you right now. So I think about that. So when I approach people about it, I'm always friendly. I'm always nice. I think you get more bees with honey. And I always come at it from a humble place. And I remember I am not the CEO of anyone else's person. And I always have to respect someone else's agency. And, the majority of the population is on the other person's side. And if they see that I'm willing to listen and hear them out and go, I understand how you can feel that way, then there'll be more, not everybody, but a lot of people will be more inclined to listen to you. And even, bringing in, I have like vegan sushi night at my house. So we'll have like vegan ice cream socials. So I'm creating like a fun space for people in my life instead of like, oh, Jasmine's coming to dinner. It's going to turn into a debate.
Thank you. Thank you for just a brilliant presentation. And I really think everything you say, Jasmine, relates to all kinds of persuasion, all kinds of leadership, all kinds of compassion. I appreciate that you brought it on a specific issue, but I think it's a really universally applicable issue, and I thank you. Yeah. And I have a pigeon, yes. It's true. I want to introduce you.
You have a pet pigeon?
Y'all from Palomacy, right?
Oh, you have a pigeon right there.
There's another pigeon right next to her, too. Y'all need to, at the break, you should stop by. Yeah. Okay, more questions. Have actual birds at a conference about them.
Hi, I just had a quick question. If there was anything with your film that now, like hindsight 2020, there was something you would more focus on or do differently after seeing like certain responses, or just the way that you feel about the film now, if there's anything that you would focus more on or just something like that.
Let's see if there's anything I would have done differently. Okay, so when I first shot the interviews, it was a long time ago, I think 6-7 years ago. And when I shot the film, it wasn't as much vegan junk food as there is now. It's like now everywhere you go, it's just, at first Ben & Jerry's, it's like, oh, well, no ice cream for me, no this, no that. Now there's vegan junk food. So in the health portion of the film, I do make a case for how it's healthier. I think I should have, looking back, I would go back in and say like, hey, to the vegan Ben & Jerry's pasta people, like that's, yeah. So that's the change I would make.
A question up here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it was a very compelling presentation. The population dynamics of this country is changing. I hear a lot of sort of historical reasons and feelings that was already established hundreds of years ago. So is the population dynamics change going to help in this cause in any way? And if you can reflect your thoughts on that.
You know what, I can't say because I'm not, I own up to my ignorance. I'm not a social scientist by any capacity, but I do think now you have more people who are mixing. Like, I honestly believe, in, I don't know, hundreds, 200 years, everybody is just going to have, it's just going to be a bunch of, everybody's going to be a little bit of everything. So we'll have a universal oneness that I don't think we have now. And I do think that that would bring us closer together, I think.
I just wanted to ask, where is this film available? Is it on Amazon or Netflix, or can we buy it somewhere?
Oh, okay, time for the plug. Yes. So you can find Invisible Vegan on Amazon Prime. If you don't have Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, it's for free. And it's also on Quelly TV, one of the only female Black-owned video streaming services. Oh, or you can buy it from my website, too.
Wait, so it's free on Amazon Prime? That's not the question, but like.
Oh yeah. If you already have Amazon Prime, you can see it. If you don't, Tubi TV, that's a free app, and it's streaming on there. Well, you supported me, my noble supporter. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. I personally had a question. So I feel like a lot of people here are activists, but also a lot of people here are white and like privileged. And so one of the issues I run into when it comes to advocating for other groups and other causes is this fear that I'm overstepping or I'm just being like that kind of like that person, So I try to understand, like, I don't understand fully what your experience is. There is a sense of ignorance. So how can you really effectively help?
I would say you just have to remember that the way people respond, it's not always about you. Like, for example, my mom, she went to segregated schools. Like the restaurant that her brother worked at, he wasn't allowed to serve his own mother because she was a Black woman. And this wasn't 400 years ago. This is my mom. So even she taught me, like, don't trust white people. Even if they're nice, just don't trust them, because of how she grew up. And I know that's an ignorant way of thinking, but I understand it. So a lot of people are growing up with those like post-generational, generational traumas. So you just have to understand, like, they're coming from a lot of pain. And sometimes whatever you do, like, you won't be able to win to lose, because I'll see members of my community, like Joaquin Phoenix, he did a speech and he pretty much gave us like the best shout out in the world. And then I heard some Black people, they were like, well, what incentive did he have to do that? And, they found they found a reason to complain. But that it comes out of pain, and there's nothing you can do about that. But as long as you're being genuine in your cause and you're going into these situations culturally competent, then I wouldn't worry about some of the backlash. That's me personally.
Well, I just wanted to ask, and this isn't to put any pressure, but do you have anything that you're working on right now? Are you, just any like films or books? I'm just curious because, and thank you so much for your incredible work and your speech.
Oh, thank you. So a few things. One of my friends, she's a burn survivor. She's covered, I think, like 85% of her body's covered in burns. She was trying to be an actress, and no one wanted to, put her in anything. So I made a short film about her. So that's going to go in the film festival circuit this year. And then I also, I'm working on a documentary, pre-production stages, about plant-based eating in the prison system, because I'm all about trying to give a voice to people who don't have a voice. So I want to kind of speak to that as well.
I just wanted to make the connection between the question in the back towards Jasmine's brilliant work with regards to being sort of shy about making the connection between animal activism and the activism of oppressed communities, and just recognizing that they are directly linked, as you have been saying in your film and in your speech, in your talk today. They're directly linked, so please have the confidence to recognize that our oppression is directly linked to the karmatic oppression that we render to animals, and to have that confidence and to know that our healing as a people, as all people, is contingent upon our releasement of oppression is contingent upon the healing of our bodies. And so feel confident to know that when you are promoting a program of veganism, of wellness amongst any community, that is you being an advocate for the wellness of all beings. So please have confidence in that, please.
Thank you. Did you have any response to that, or?
Oh, no, it was an eloquent comment. Thank you.
Okay, another hand for Jasmine Leyva.